Okay, I am currently at Eastern Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky. Eastern Cemetery is known as the most overburied cemetery in the country. And a lot of things went on with Eastern Cemetery. There are actually 3 cemeteries that were owned by the same company and went through, I don't know the correct word for it, the madness, the devastation, the disrespect. I can't find the right word for it. But the history of this cemetery in particular is it is more overburied than any cemetery in the country. And when I say overburied, there are, and don't quote me on these numbers, roughly 35,000 graves. And behind me, some of these are dated from like the 80s and the 90s. So it's not really old, or a really long time ago where people were buried here. The number of people documented buried here is over 110,000. And you heard me a minute ago say that there are like 35,000 graves here, and 100 and some thousand people are buried here. So Rob and I were out here maybe a year and a half ago, and we did plan on coming back, but we didn't quite make it back out here. So I am now out here, and I don't know. This is one of those cemeteries. We also visited a cemetery in Florida called Babyland. It's like the Babyland that everybody knows of when you say Babyland. This one in section 19 also has a Babyland. And I'm not gonna walk back there because I'm uncomfortable, but because you can't really see from the road. So I'm gonna drive back there, walk some, but I'm not gonna leave my car up here. I'd like to be able to see my vehicle. And we may be visiting the other 2 cemeteries. This one is Eastern Cemetery. There was the Greenwood Cemetery, and that is in Louisville's West End. And there is, I believe at one time it was called Chardin Cemetery. And we have went over there. It's now known as the 7th Street Cemetery. And it's also like back off from the road. Currently they are, of course, not allowing any new bodies to be buried here. And I'm gonna pull up like further in the cemetery, and I will tell the story of what I know about Eastern Cemetery. Before I do pull back there, where those apartments are, that used to be a nightclub called Phoenix Hill. And Phoenix Hill did have some haunted happenings in it. I'm assuming maybe, and I don't know, maybe it had something to do with the cemetery being directly across the street. Now it's apartments. So I don't know if anyone's had any issues in there, but there is a house there, and it's still there. And Rob has a friend who grew up in that house, and he said that there were some odd things to happen in that house also. But let's see, while we're up on the front end, we can get a better look. And it's crazy with this cemetery, in my mind at least, because right on the other side of that brick wall is one of the most prestigious cemeteries in Louisville. So, you know, and even with Eastern Cemetery, it kind of tied into that, and that's Cave Hill, I'm sorry. That's Cave Hill Cemetery on the other side of the wall. When this cemetery was still being buried, workers would actually throw bones over that wall. So, you know, I mean, this place has a really, really crazy history. And I hate to walk in the grass because I don't know if there's a hole in there or anything like that. And I don't want to end up having to go live and screaming at y'all begging for help. So right now I can't really, I'm going to take the chance. So, I forgot what I was saying, but the history behind Eastern Cemetery. It was one of the first integrated cemeteries in the city of Louisville, if not the state of Kentucky. And you can see some stones are knocked over, and there are some behind me. We were told that when COVID hit and everything was shut down, teenagers came in here and destroyed headstones, you know, which is another slap in the face to the families who have loved ones buried here. Okay, so to drive through here, I'm going to record as I drive and turn off the air so you can hear me talking. And I'm going to kind of talk, and that's because I don't really feel comfortable walking back here. It is a way back, and I'm not armed at the moment, and I'm alone. So it's going to be a drive through Eastern Cemetery for the moment. And you can see, you know, people still visit their loved ones here. But, okay, so the story with Eastern Cemetery is way back when in the 1800s, Eastern Cemetery was purchased, from what I know, by donations from church members of a Methodist church. And said church members started doing some unscrupulous things. So maybe they started out doing the right thing. I don't know. But eventually they would start to watch the graves, and they would see who was getting visitors and who wasn't. And those who weren't getting visitors, they would dig them up and resell the grave. And even, you know, after years and time goes by, family members pass away and nobody really starts getting visitors. So probably just about every grave in this cemetery was resold. And even up until the 90s, graves were being resold. The way they found out was they were having a funeral, and there is like a building back that way. I'm not sure what the building is called, but from what I've been told, they would have services and then bring the body out to the cemetery and bury it out here. So I don't know if at the time when they got busted that they had the service in there, but they were having, you know, the burial or whatever, and a skull rolled from under a tarp. And of course the people panicked, and that kind of snowballed. And once things started coming out, a disgruntled worker started talking more and, you know, telling what was going on. And the sad thing about it is no one ever served any time for any of this. They were still burying on top of people into the 90s. You know, it didn't stop in the 1850s. And that's when they first documented it. Or, you know, and it would have something in the books that said OG. And OG was for old grave. So it went on for what, 170 years, a little over 170 years. And we were out here last year, Rob and we talked to a lady from Georgia who was here for her grandfather, and his headstone is still there, but she wasn't sure if, and there's one missing the head on that one, she wasn't sure if he is the only one in that grave. And, you know, people might ask, you know, well, why don't you just get your loved one and bury them somewhere else? It's not that easy. So in the state of Kentucky, and maybe every state for all I know, I just know about here, in order to exhume a body, you have to, you know, get permission from the family, the next of kin. And it's not cheap, from what I hear. I don't know the price, but it ain't cheap. So you may have one body in a grave. You might have 30 bodies in a grave. So you would actually have to find those families, get their permission, and there's the building I was talking about. Get their permission from each and every family member if they're still around. And then you'd basically have to pay to get every single body out of that grave. So you would need an archaeologist or something to be able to do that. So it's not just as simple as, you know, getting them out and moving them. It's not that easy. So that is a big part of the problem. And I'm going to do a turnabout here. And the first time that we were here, we were told that this concrete road that I'm driving on, there are bones of people and bodies of people under this concrete. This is how bad it is here. So it's a whole mess. In the 80s or 90s, you know, there would be a woman who worked here. I can't remember her name. And all these people should have went to jail. They should still be in jail. She would go to like the hospitals, and she would talk to the mothers who had lost babies, and, you know, she would act like, you know, she's their friend or something, and she's there to help. And, you know, at the end of the conversation is, well, you know, I can help you and I can take care of this, and, you know, make sure your baby is buried properly for $75. So, you know, she would sit there and she would smile in their face while stabbing them in their back at one of the worst times probably in their lives. And at one time, a box of babies was found here. And when I say a box, I mean like a behind box with a bunch of bodies of babies in here. And I believe that Babyland is right over there. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that is where the Babyland of Eastern Cemetery is. And you can see even back here, there are quite a few old graves. And there are houses like on both sides. You know, this is Irish Hill. It's not a bad neighborhood. We have Bargetown Road, like, you know, right next to here. And it's a nice area. So for this to be the case with Eastern Cemetery is really, really, really. There is a group. It's called Friends of Eastern Cemetery, and they come out here and they volunteer, and normally they, you know, take care of the grass and make sure everything is as good as it can get. And they also have a video. You could watch like a full documentary of it and see the families of the people here. It's called Facing East. And the lady that we met here last year, she said, she explained and said that it was called Facing East because of the way lots of people are buried. They are buried facing east. And the way she explained it was she knew the Indian custom of a certain tribe. I'm not sure which tribe, can't remember. But they would bury them facing east, and the sun would always be to their back. Okay, so we are in the back of, I don't know, what is this called, this building?
Well, they did the services up there. I think they also had the crematorium was in there.
Okay, so I am
You can see
correct.
the stack here. Where
Yeah. And as you can see, I guess someone's been sleeping or living out here, dumping, I don't know. But Rob did find graves over here, and they only have one date. So we're assuming that, of course, that is a child. We're assuming that maybe they were stillborn.
So this one.
those were probably twins.
Like these here. They just have a piece of paper in there.
You don't even really see those.
Alright.
I see 1988.
Yeah, April 25th, 1998. For like that one, you can't see it all. It's terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Put their sink in. Somebody's taking care of one of them.
Yeah, I did see flowers like maybe midway through.
Yeah,
And there are flowers over here.
Somebody's visiting this area back here, but flowers too.
It's weird. It doesn't look like the person on the right has passed away yet. So I'm gonna assume, I'm willing to bet that there's no way he could be buried here. Because I think the last burial was in the 90s here, and they don't know, if someone else may be there.
Yeah, it's saying that this woman won't be buried there. Because I don't think they're allowed to put more bodies in there. This one was one passed in '87.
Looks like a World War II veteran. And the entrance there has been sealed off. It was sealed off years ago.
Yeah, this lady said that people kept breaking in.
And then just past the barbed wire wall